Ready a couple of minutes to roll in. Oh, good. I see my the board co-chair. Oh, why are we echoing? Okay, I think we're all right. All right, this is fun. So while I wait to do the introductions, because I know we have one person joining us from Ashland, Oregon. Maybe if you want to drop in your chat where you're joining us from today. This is the beauty of doing online OEN events, is that we can get folks from around the state. Oh, wow, people are just rolling in. Okay. Wow, like this is amazing. I see John Harkness, I see Heather Ellis, I see all kinds of folks. All right, I'm going to go ahead and get started because we're at that 1 minute mark. I just got so excited by the flood of people coming to our event. Good morning. Happy Tuesday. I think it's May 23rd. It is. It says there. Welcome to OEN's virtual education event, prioritizing the mental health of entrepreneurs. We're really excited to be doing this today. My name is Kara Toronto. Oh, okay, good. We're very excited. I love the shout outs online. I'm the president and executive director of OEN. And before we really dive in, I was just going to say, when I mentioned to the board of directors at OEN last month that we were hosting this event, there was a pause in the room and somebody actually said, finally. And I said, what is that about? And we had somebody that has come back on the board because OEN's, a 32-year-old organization. And he was on the board about 10 years ago. And he said, entrepreneurs started asking for this a decade ago. And it's nice to see that we're finally doing it. So thanks for joining us today. We have everybody on mute as they come in the room. We ask that you remain muted. We'd love to have you on video because we like to see your smiling faces. So if that's possible. And then if you have questions, we have a variety of ways to ask them. You can put them in the chat box publicly. You can send them privately to the OEN host, which is going to be Riley. You can send them to me, or you can raise your hand using the icon and unmute yourself when we call on you and ask directly. And I will let our fantastic panelists let us know how comfortable they feel with that happening during the middle of the panel. So I think my last job is to just introduce this amazing crew of people. I am so excited to be here today with folks that I respect immensely. So our moderator is going to be Reggie Wideman. He's the founder of 1 Minute for Mental Health. If you're not following them, I strongly suggest it. Last week, he unintentionally had a group of folks that were all connected in the tech sector. So you're getting all kinds of 1 Minute for Mental Health Awareness Month. We also have joining us Kasey Jones, Managing Director of Virtual Inc. We also have Ryan Schwartz, CEO and founder of Mental Health Match, and Anthony Ware, founder and principal researcher of Founder Mental Wealth. I think that's it. I think I hand it off to Reggie now, and I am so excited. So thanks everyone for being here. And Reggie, the floor is all yours.
Thank you, Kara. And thanks everyone for joining us today. I thought I was going to do the intros. So now we can just jump to the good stuff. So I'm really excited about that. But seriously, thanks everybody for joining us today. Obviously, we're going to have a conversation about entrepreneurs and mental health. And Kara, I think you're right. This is a conversation that we've been needing to have for a long time. It's a conversation that's been very near and dear to me as someone who's worked in the tech industry for 20 years and who has prioritized their mental health, which has had positive and negative impacts in conversations with employers. So we are here to reduce stigma. We are here to create awareness. And they say a moderator is only as good as their panel, which means that my job is going to be super easy today. So let's jump in with a first initial question, which I think is a good baseline starting question. And I'm going to throw it to you, Kasey, to give your thoughts, and then we'll go around the panel. So why should entrepreneurs talk about mental health?
Ooh, that's a big question. So I think the biggest reason why we should all be talking about it is because we should all be working on it and prioritizing it. And I think there's a bit of a stigma associated with talking about mental health struggles or even talking about needing to put in effort towards mental health. But I also think, especially as entrepreneurs, a lot of us are notoriously notoriously bad at asking for help in general. It's something that we kind of take a little bit of pride in our fierce independence and grittiness and all these other things. And there's a good side to that, but there's a really challenging side to that as well. And so hearing others talk about how it's not always easy, talk about how they cope, how they improve on things, how they support themselves, and how that supports their business and their goals and their growth as a human and as an entrepreneur. It can really help someone who is struggling realize that they're not alone in that, and that they can reach out and kind of get that support. And so it's a little bit of, we want to talk about it to help us, but we also want to talk about it to help the other folks that might be dealing with similar things and need to know that they're not alone.
I love that. And I'm taking notes because I'm hearing modeling and I'm hearing vulnerability coming out of what you're saying. So we're going to definitely come back to those topics. Ryan, what are your thoughts? Why should we be having these conversations?
Yeah, well, I mean, everything Kasey said, and then I'm going to add kind of my own perspective of this, which is, mental health is a term that we often focus on kind of like just staying out of crisis mode or avoiding the bad things or the negative things or the distressing things. But the flip side of mental health is really mental performance. It's understanding how your brain works. It's understanding what insights come from your emotions and your feelings and what you holistically need to not only be healthy, but also to make good decisions as an entrepreneur. And so for me, I think, mental health, mental performance is being an entrepreneur. It is being clear, it is being honest, it is being transparent about what is going on with yourself. And I just have a hard time understanding how you can really separate it successfully. It is core to the entrepreneurial experience.
100%. And I heard from their frameworks. So we're going to come back to that as well. Anthony, what are your thoughts?
Wow. Well, I love that you start out with this question. So I think on its basics level, talking about anything helps lead to action. So when in terms of like mental health, the way I think about it is that we have mental health from the time we're born to the time we die. And it's the state of our mental health that changes in our lifetime. And it's the state of our mental health that is the foundation for everything we do as a human, every decision we make, every interaction we have. So entrepreneurs are human, last I checked, at least for now. So as entrepreneurs, if we're not paying attention to the state of our mental health, then we are doing our self disservice. Yeah.
Well, I love that. And before we move on to another question, I want to double back on some of the topics we covered here. I'd like to talk about modeling, and I'd like to get all of your thoughts on strategies for modeling sort of appropriate, mental health behaviors, if you will. And I'll throw out there that is something that I've been super focused on. And when I talk to teams about focusing on mental health in their organization, I spend a lot of time talking about modeling. And it's anything from putting therapy on your calendar, so it's just something if people are looking to schedule with you, they see that's something that you do. It's casually talking about that. One thing I'm notorious for is I'll say, I was talking to my therapist the other day and she made a really good point. Like, I will put those things in conversations because those are ways to just sort of normalize things. What are your thoughts on that? We can go backwards. Anthony, what do you think on that topic first?
Yeah, I think when it comes to modeling, it actually kind of ties into to something Kasey and Ryan were saying in terms of performance and then, our peer interactions. I think that doing things and sharing what you're doing is good because no one understands the entrepreneur journey except for the entrepreneurs. But then you're also helping your team and the people that interact with you. So I think modeling can be as much as what you said when it comes to like, hey, I'm talking to my therapist, but also if you have a day with no meetings, don't go scheduling meetings. Don't hold to that standard. And then also just modeling the things. Modeling is good because I think we don't know what we don't know. So in order to see that or learn something, we have to see in our community. So from an entrepreneur standpoint, like your employees may not know anything about self-care and therapy and whatnot, or your peers may not know about what to do, but you may give them the thing like therapy. Oh, therapy. Now I know about therapy, but I don't know. So it's that example, and helping us all kind of learn and grow.
Yeah. Ryan, how do you model for those in your network or who work for you along with you?
Yeah, I think that, a few of the things said already. So being very transparent about going to therapy and what I'm learning for therapy, being, open about my self-care practices. So my team, we work a 4-day work week, and I started with that because I feel like that is actually allows for real rest, which helps productivity and helps our goals. But I think that there's an element of being open to vulnerability there. And this is really interesting because a lot of founders kind of dismiss vulnerability and want to project overconfidence because they think that they need to have all of the answers, or always be the one who has like the clear point of view, and oftentimes we don't, right? And so I find that just being honest and saying, like, I'm feeling anxious about this I'm seeing in our customer trends, or I am feeling underprepared for this meeting. I didn't sleep well last night. Just being honest about my emotions is really helpful for people to see. And then it also, like, the flip side is it builds trust in you, right? Like, I've just seen founders who always project overconfidence, always pretend they have the answer even when they don't. And it really hurts relationships because your team doesn't think that they can give you ideas or has, or is valued in the same way. And so being vulnerable helps create that team and helps build relationships. And I think it's a really great way to model mental health care.
Love that. And Kasey, I'll give you a specific version of that question because I know that in your, some of the work you do, you consult with organizations. So in that capacity, how do you model for organizations that you're external to, but you're consulting for?
Yeah. So, and I'll touch on what both Anthony and Ryan shared here. It's, for whatever reason, I am a little more comfortable than the average person talking about very personal things. And as a result, I feel this sort of vested interest. I feel like I have this like duty and obligation to a little overshare to break the stigma of some of these things. And I think, especially in my consulting work and the work that I do with organizations, I will be very transparent about the things that I have been through or that I go through, and the things that I've learned and the benefits that have come out of that, so that they can see that someone who they respect, I mean, I assume they do if they're paying me, that they respect and that they believe in, and whose professionalism they kind of support and see, can also be somebody that speaks very openly about past trauma and struggle and all the rest. And I know that being able to speak about these things openly helps them start to realize, like, oh, wait, these things are not mutually exclusive. You can be a badass professional who's really damn good at what you do, and also someone who talks about trauma and mental health struggles and all the rest. And I think the other thing that, that Ryan said in the answer to the first question was really talking about performance. And that's how I like to model things, is like when we can talk about our active work and our approach to peeling back those layers and understanding ourselves better and healing in all these ways, in the guise of this self-improvement and all these other things. Some of those people that think you only go to a therapist when you're in full-on crisis mode will start to be like, oh, wait, maybe this is actually preventative things. And right, in the United States, healthcare in general, we don't really think about prevention and wellness. We think about taking the pill or going to the doctor when things are really bad. And so it's a cultural shift, but if we can start to show that there's another way to do things, and that it's coming from people that you kind of respect or admire, people start to be like, oh shit, like maybe I can shift my thinking here and do things in a different way that supports me before things get bad.
I love that. And Kasey, that transition was like butter, because the next topic was
The queen
Ryan,
of the segue. No, I'm just kidding.
Ryan, you were talking about mental health and mental performance, and Anthony, you were talking about mental wealth. I'd like for both of you to sort of talk a little bit about how those show up for an entrepreneur. Right.
Anthony, you want to go first? Oh,
sorry, Ryan, you go first. I should have done that better.
sorry for stepping on your toes. Yeah, I mean, so the way I think about it is we only access what's in our subconscious on the regular, right? It's like at the very surface level of what we're thinking or what we can identify as feelings. But there's a whole subconscious of patterns that you have and assumptions and associations that actually dictate and lead you to most of your behaviors. And so the way I think about it is if you don't examine that subconscious, it's kind of like you're running your brain on DOS. Like you haven't upgraded your operating system, right? And so when you start to do that, you can start to learn certain things about yourself. Where do feelings of anxiety or self-worth come from, right? So I had a brief led venture that I did with somebody. We ended up pivoting away from it, but it was therapy for startup founders. And we started talking about things with founders where we'd often see, that there's a big fear of failure, right? I mean, this is, where founders often be a little competitive or they have high standards, kind of perfectionism. And so, we have an innate fear of failure, but what we continue to see was that meant that was leading subconsciously to a lot of avoidance of things with a high level of uncertainty. So making key pivots, doing key customer research, like these things kind of just got put on a back burner because there was this fear. And so by actually kind of digging into your subconscious and learning about it and understanding how you operate, you start to learn and you start to see where those fears are coming up and what they're leading you to. And then you can make better decisions and say like, oh, I've been avoiding this customer research and I understand why now, but now I just need to go do it because I know that that's right for the business itself. And so I think that kind of avoidance of fears or avoidance of distressing situations, avoidance of uncertainty is where some of this really pops up a lot for entrepreneurs. And the second place I would just say is, entrepreneurs often have to change with their business, right? So if you're a founder, you might be really used to doing everything. You might really like a sense of control. But if you've got a Series A, if you've built out your team, you have to delegate and you have to give up that control. And where I see a lot of founders kind of suffer in that growth moment and in those phases is that they don't recognize that they're clinging under control. And then they end up micromanaging and they burn themselves out because they're trying to do everything and they hurt relationships with teammates. And so that's kind of a second place where I see that a lot.
Yeah, I may or may not have met those founders several times throughout my career. And talk to us about the concept of mental wealth.
Yeah, so in my entrepreneur journey, I've had a lot of ups and a lot of like downs. Ups, like big wins with partnerships, downs, horrible relationships with co-founders, attorneys involved, all that kind of fabulous stuff, and everything in between. And so over the last few years, I've thought about mental health, and so often it's talked about in the context of a mental illness. And so I was like, well, what if we just think about it in the flip side? So there's a lot of focus and stress that comes from money, but like when people talk about money, it's usually financial wealth. And so I thought about, what if we do these, the little things we do, self-care, whether it's therapy or whether it's coloring books or whether it's photography, whatever, everything you do that makes a positive impact on the state of your mental health, a mental wealth deposit. And so how that shows up for an entrepreneur is that, one of the things to do, much to like what Ryan was saying, is kind of this retrospective on your life. And we forget, because entrepreneurs are so present / looking forward, we forget all of the things we've done to help us to get to where we are, whether it's being a part of a community back in the day, or having some kind of travel experience, or some kind of like work experience, or some kind of creative experience, or volunteer, or whatever. All these things help us remember who we are. And, you know, these deposits start to create wealth, and much like financial wealth, it's all compounding, right? And so when bad things do happen, and challenges do come up, you're able to work through them in a way that you may not have before. And you know, it ties into your identity and ties into how you look at, I mean, which is, we can go to another tangent, but like, you know, when you have those battles of my business failed, but I'm not a failure, right? Because you understand, because you built mental wealth, you understand that the business is a business. And my wealth is, my personal wealth and my value is infinite.
Oh, these transitions are killing it. It's almost as if we prepped for this. So we've laid a really great foundation for the topic that we're covering today. But I think it's also important to sort of dig into some of the nitty gritty. And I'll start with a little bit of personal anecdote, and then I'd love to hear from each of you. You know, for me, over the past couple of years, it's been a really powerful unlock to realize that I am not my work, right? And that this deck getting done today, or the meeting that didn't go as well as I wanted it to, did not cause the stock price to fluctuate for the company that I was working at, right? And that was very helpful for me. Where it was different was when I launched 1 Minute for Mental Health, because everything that didn't go well with that, or that I didn't like how it turned out, was my fault. It was my fault. And if it could have been done better, it could have been done better by me. So we talk a lot about mental health, and we talk about ways that we should be supporting ourselves, but how do we manage the difficulty of that separation between yourself and the business, particularly when things aren't going well? Do you want to lead us off, Kasey?
Oh, this is a good one. It's a heavy one. And I think it's not just founders, right? I mean, I think unless we've got a couple sociopaths in the Zoom room, I'm pretty sure that every single person on this call is like 100 times meaner to themselves than to anyone else in their lives. Like, this is just sort of how humans are built, unfortunately. And so I think, you know, we're talking a lot about mental health, and I think this goes a little bit also to this idea of it not always be focused on how do you fix things that aren't working or that are broken, but also how do you amplify and cultivate things that just feel really freaking good. And I will say, and I still do this, I mean, people fairly regularly, it's better than it used to be, fairly regularly will like marvel at my like magical ability to be like the most self-deprecating human on the face of the planet. And I'm really not so great at taking compliments, but I will also say, like, I've put in a ton of work at getting better at that. And I would say something that has been as helpful, if not more, than the now 7.5 years of regular therapy that I've been. No, I'm overselling it. It's 7 years. It's 7 years. I'm literally coming up on my 7-year anniversary with my therapist. Anyway, do you get your therapist a present for your anniversary? I don't know. I keep thinking about that, but
it's called a copay.
It's called the magical like gold value of my tears. No, I think something that has helped me a tremendous amount is I've put in a lot of intention into finding ways to absolutely freaking love myself and think that I am amazing. And that's not something that we are taught to do at a young age, or at least most of us aren't. And it's not something that always comes naturally. But I think this is the thing, it's things are always going to be hard. Anything like really good there's going to be a lot of struggle to it. That's the fundamental truth of kind of life and achievement and all the rest. But when we can absolutely freaking love ourselves and appreciate what we are doing and the work we are putting in and the effort and the passion and the love and all the rest while we're doing it, it becomes much, much easier to separate, I don't know, the KPIs of our business and our own self-worth.
Yeah.
And I also think it's really, really important to find other things in your life that matter to you than business. And I'm saying this as genuinely like a recovering workaholic. Like, I love my work and I work a little too much, but I also work really hard to find moments to be super present and to just appreciate the little things and kind of bask in, I don't know, the simplicity of having a dog snoring on my lap, or drinking like a really fabulous, maybe a little bit expensive bottle of wine, having an incredible meal, going for a long walk, like the little things. And like, we've got to find ways to have a full life while also building a kick-ass world-changing business.
Anthony, you were talking a little bit earlier about some business difficulties that you've experienced throughout your career. So in that context, how did you separate? Were you able to separate? And if you weren't then, what was the unlock for you? Oh, you're muted.
3 years into this, and I still forget that. Yeah, actually, flat out, I wasn't. The first big failure, I was a hot mess. The second, I was a little better, and unfortunate enough, I had a great mentor that he was a friend and a mentor and an executive coach all wrapped into one, and he just said, make sure you show up and you don't have to pay. So it was kind of nice. Fast forward now, I actually lean into pay attention to what some of my peers have done. That and the research I did. So research around self-care practices, and the top 5 things were time with friends and watching Netflix and reading books and working out and travel. And so I make sure I'm doing one or all 5 of those. This weekend happened to be almost all 5. Yeah, all 5, because I ran this morning. And so it's one of those things where I think what's helped me now is the understanding that all these things we talk about, any solution that we talk about on this talk today, some of them may work for me today and the entrepreneurs, but they may not all work, or some combination may work for you today. And then 5 years from now, whatever you're doing, that same combination may not work for you because hopefully you're different. And I think ultimately back to the point I was making earlier about I'm not my business. And yeah, I want to do great and all this. And to Kasey's point, finding stuff outside to that, not only the small things, but just you have a life. And I don't believe in work-life balance or integration or any of that. I have a life, and it's like a big umbrella, and a whole bunch of stuff falls under it. So I want to experience all of the rain, all of that stuff under the umbrella, and sometimes step out and feel the rain. And I think the last piece of this is thinking of the concept of mental wealth. My bank account isn't always going up, nor is the state of my mental health always going up. And so be real. I'm forget all the hype, forget the PR, forget all the messaging that comes from business magazines. You're human. There's challenges. You're interacting with other humans. There's going to be even exponential challenges. And that's the real part of it. And it's so if that's the real part, then what do you want to do? How do you want to be moved by that? Or do you want to have intentionality, to Kasey and I think point earlier about be intentional about the outcomes of your life, of which a business is part of it.
I love that. And Anthony, thanks to you, the classic New Edition song, Can You Stand the Rain, is stuck in my head for the rest of this presentation. So I'm going to be slightly distracted. Ryan, what are your thoughts?
I think I'm gonna peel back some layers on myself and just talk about my personal experience and then try to extrapolate that a little bit. Um, I grew up really, really hard on myself. And I grew up in a household where love and pride was expressed through achievement, right? Through good grades, through honor roll, like all of the things. And so I learned from an early age that my self-worth was dependent on my achievements. And I also learned, I grew up as like a little queer kid in Texas. So I like internalized that like something was different about me, something was wrong with me. And so I developed patterns to always blame myself first. And that was like before I even left high school, I had both of those patterns and those stretched into my career. And it was through some really down moments of expressing that like through my business that was failing at different moments, really, really hard on myself, calling myself a failure, versus like seeing that like more externalized, like everything was just blaming myself. And then there was a lot of therapy that I did to kind of start to make some patterns and like, oh yeah, that voice that says that, oh, my business isn't doing well, so therefore I'm a failure. That was instilled in childhood, and that voice has been living rent free in my head. And it's time to deal with that voice, or that voice that wants to blame myself for everything. Like that voice is living rent free in my head, and it's time to deal with that voice. And so like, it's some simple tricks from therapy. Like I gave those voices names, and then I could see them and I'd be like, okay, Drew, it's time to get out. Like, I'm not listening to you today. Drew is the name of the kid who like bullied me in high school. So I got one voice, and it's helpful to start to see those things. And then, you learn through some failures that like, oh, I came out okay. I learned a whole lot, right? And so then there becomes a level of learning acceptance, which is really hard, right? And some mindfulness of being in the present moment. We spend most of our time either living in the future or the past. Our heads are either in one of those two places most of the time. And it's really hard to like sit in the present and just say like, this feels awful. I built this company and I have to lay everybody off now. And this is a learning lesson, and I'm growing, and my trajectory doesn't end today. So let me sit with that. Let me accept what's happening and learn from it and grow from that. And I think that those have been really helpful perspective shifts for me that have helped me realize that my self-worth is really independent of the performance of my business at any given moment. And you learn to like you wouldn't talk to your friends or your team the way you talk to yourself a lot, and you begin to notice those patterns of when you're really lacking self-compassion. So like very early on in therapy, my therapist was just like amazed of my lack of self-compassion, which is like, it's hard to amaze a therapist on some of those things. And you're like, ooh, and like literally like, I wasn't taking lunch breaks. They were like, what do you do for lunch? And I was like, oh, I just work. And they're like, what are some other things that you could do during lunch? And I was just like, what, huh? Like I couldn't think of anything. And so like I started journaling a little bit at lunch, and like just for like 4 months, like journaled about prompts of self-compassion about my day and like where I was seeing myself beat myself up. And all of that has helped me kind of develop some new patterns and dump the ones that weren't working for me and learn to love myself outside of anything that might be going on in the business.
I love that. There's a great passage in the book, The Untethered Soul, where the author runs you through this exercise of personifying the voice in your head as a person sitting next to you. And at the end of it, he then says, now, would you tolerate anyone speaking to you the way this person is speaking to you? What would you do? You would ignore them. You would never speak to them again. You would tell them to get out of your house, right? He's like, do that next time that voice tries to talk to you. So that completely resonates with me. Okay, so we talked a lot about what we can do for ourselves, right? How we can support ourselves and how we navigate for ourselves. So let's externalize this a little bit. And I'll give each of you multiple lenses, whether we're talking about a co-founder or business partner, whether we're talking about investors, a board, or whether we're talking about a customer that you're working closely with. How do you externalize this? And I'm not talking really about modeling at this point. It's that you've built a framework for yourself to keep yourself mentally healthy. But, plans usually don't survive interacting with reality, right? So how do we navigate dealing with these external forces, right? Whether we openly are talking about our mental health, whether we're asking for support, or whether we're concerned about the mental health of others who we have to do business with. And I'm giving you a broad lens, so don't feel like you have to answer a specific question a specific way. That makes it easier and harder. Anthony, since you're laughing so hard, let's start with you.
Oh, I love it. Well, when you say it like that, you allowed me to speak in Tangenese, which is, the language of tangents, right? So I peel it back to like remembering that it is your business. So when I hear entrepreneurs say, I have back-to-back meetings every day of the week, I'm like, that's on you. Like truly, like I'm trying to think of like actionable things. Like, for example, for the better part of the last 4 years, I've had an autoresponder on my email. I adjust it for like marketing other people's stuff and marketing my stuff. I have the subject line or something about like, if you send me an email, you'll see it. Copy, paste, remix it. And when it comes to like external forces, like you could say, I'm only going to have meetings on Tuesdays and Thursdays. So when people look at your Calendly, there better be Tuesday and Thursday only availabilities. And setting up things like that, you can call it boundaries or whatever, but that's just like you're operating and you're doing it for your mental health or probably productivity or whatever. But the foundation of that is going to impact the state of your mental health. The last piece that I want to say is that when you're thinking of things that you're doing for your mental health, you don't know what to do until you, like Ryan and Kasey have talked about, like you gotta find out who the heck are you. Like when's the last time you actually just took the time for that? That's not, you don't even need a therapist to start that. Like remember, like I said earlier, like who are you, what have you done, and those kind of things. Little experiences like learning to ride a bike and all this, but getting grounded in like who you are. So then when you interact with a co-founder, which that's a long-term relationship build, so you're not going to find a co-founder overnight. You may find somebody overnight that, hey, they could potentially be investors. Like not all money is good money, straight up. And you take the time to learn your investors, because the worst thing that can happen is you find bad money. Worse than that, actually, the worst thing that can happen is you run out of money and you go out of business. It's happened. You can find another job or start another business. But if you hook up with the wrong investor, that's going to be like, well, it's like being in like a toxic relationship, a bad relationship, whatever. Nothing good can come out of it, even though the money could be great. But it's all grounded in you. And so if anything, if you're one of those folks who like to schedule or need to schedule, give yourself a long weekend. Give yourself a week. Call it a retreat. You can do it at your home, do a staycation, get a hotel in Portland, go out of, borrow somebody's cabin, do whatever, but have a retreat for your life. And then, oh, by the way, your business, because your business all the time, and you've probably heard this, I'll close with this, is everything happening in your business is a reflection of everything going on in your inside of you, period, point blank. Every relationship, every decision, all that. So yeah, I think there's enough tangents in there, but coming back, build mental wealth, and you'll be able to ride the waves of this entrepreneur journey.
I love that, Anthony. I think you're going to have to be my startup mentor, especially if you're going to say to me, worst thing that's going to happen is you're going to run out of business and run out of money and go out of business. I love it. I do want to touch upon your autoresponder comment, because I've experienced your autoresponder. I love your autoresponder. And I think if we're looking for things that are quite actionable, I've experienced those more and more with people. And it's really great. And I'm going to talk about it from the other side, as everybody needs something. Everybody wants something. And I found that in scenarios where I've reached out to someone because I need something from them, and I get an autoresponder that's setting clear expectations, that is incredibly calming for me. Like if I get an autoresponder from you that says, hey, I'm taking some time for myself, I'll be gone for several days, I will respond to your message when I return. That is so much more helpful than like, I'm trying to get something, I email you and I don't hear anything. you know, and we've all been through that, right? Where you're like, and you're starting to tell stories in your head. Oh, they hate me. They heard bad things about me. And then you get an email that says, hey, I was out of town. What's up? Let's talk tomorrow. And you're like, oh, it's fine. Right. So I think the autoresponder is a really powerful tool. And it's actually something I'm going to try to adopt more because it's just helpful for other people as well as allowing you to create a nice layer for yourself to make time for yourself. So I just wanted to add a little PSA on that. All right, Kasey, do you even remember the question?
Yeah, no, I do. I mean, it was kind of a broad question, but I'm going to build a little bit on what Anthony said. And I think, look, I think it's, and kind of to go to your point, Reggie, it's about setting expectations. Mm-hmm. So I'm a big believer in talking things out and being very honest. So, I don't have an autoresponder, but like if you call me and you get my voicemail, it'll be like, hey, you can leave me a voicemail, but I probably won't listen to it. So if you need to get a hold of me, send me a text message. And people always will send me, and they'll be like, that was hilarious. I'm the same way. I really should change that. Or like I did an autoresponder I went on vacation, my first, like my partner and I, like our first real vacation in a long time. And my autoresponder was like, hey, if you're getting this, I'm hopefully on a sailboat in the Greek Isles, sipping on a fabulous glass of wine and getting some much needed sunshine. And then I said, let's be honest, I don't save lives. Yeah. Anything you need from me can wait. I'll get back to you when I get back in town. And like, there's something, we can set expectations and we can be very upfront with people in a way that makes people laugh, in a way that makes people be like, yeah, dude, I respect it. But also that like, it helps people know who you are, your style, your approach in certain ways. And so I think the biggest shift for me in my life has been, well, it's been kind of twofold. One, it's me realizing that the real result of my kind of childhood traumas of perpetually feeling not good enough was an addiction to busyness. Mm. So I always thought when they're like, oh, your like default trauma response, when they would talk about flight, I'd be like, I don't run away from things. Like that's bullshit. I don't do that. Yeah, I do. Guess how I do it? I'm just too busy. I'm just too busy all the time. I got too much to do. I don't have time to deal with my like emotions and my shit. And PS, very common with entrepreneurs. And so I started to be like, okay, and my therapist will occasionally joke about how I'm more of a human doing than a human being. Thanks, Ryan. Thank you, really. But legit, like starting to be like, okay, how do I peel back those layers and like give myself space and to just be, to not constantly be listening to something or consuming something or doing something like that. That alone has been absolutely transformative. I am more in touch with my intuition, like my needs, my wants, all these other things. And by doing that, it made it much easier for me to start to set boundaries because I started to understand that when I took that meeting that I didn't want to take, how it made me feel. Or I was too freaking busy. I didn't even know. And then I dropped the ball with the meeting and pissed someone off. But like now it's much easier for me to be like, hey, I don't operate that way. That doesn't work for me. If you want to work together, like this is the stuff that I will do. This is the stuff that I won't do. And being able to communicate clearly and openly and without drama about what I need and like how I need to, like the systems I need to kind of create to be successful and to like be my best, strongest, most badass version of me. It makes my relationships better. It makes me happier. It makes me better at my work. Like it's a million things. But the first step for me was slowing down. I'm trying not to drop the F-bomb like 1,000 times on this call. If we all talk like on a one-on-one, that's what you'll get. But like slowing down so that I even knew how I was feeling. That was the thing that changed truly everything for me. And it's the thing that I probably prioritize more than anything else in my life and in how I communicate with others about like who I am and how I work and things they need to kind of accept about me.
I love it. The self bleep on the F-bomb was the chef's kiss of everything you said. I want you to know that.
Years of practice, Reggie, years of practice.
Ryan, we're talking about dealing with those external relationships, and I'm seeing a theme, and I'm going to see if you continue it. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, I love what's been said so far, and I think like I would call those boundaries, right? Like knowing your boundaries about what you need to work. I've built a couple of companies. I'm currently building a decentralized company with like 40 other therapists at the moment, and it is amazing to see how therapists work in this space. And there's a lot of boundary setting, right? And I love like one of them shared with me like one of their favorite quotes is like a boundary is the distance of which I can love you and love me simultaneously. And I just thought that was like really interesting, and it can really apply to work as well. So, and like, I think we have fears sometimes of setting boundaries, but like, I, I have nothing but respect when people set boundaries. Like, and I think most people do. And so, it's good to hear that. And so I think, understanding what you need and communicating that back, definitely a theme. Um, I do want to talk about two things. I want to talk about investors for a second, and I'll just say like not all money is the same. And so it's really important for you to pick investors who are going to work with you on your values and what you care about. If they're going to push you to run your company or run your life in ways that aren't going to be good for you, it's important to like think about that ahead of time. And I think sometimes we get so eager to get money and to fundraise that we just take whatever comes with us. And I made that mistake myself, right? And then I realized like what that means as you build a business with somebody who's demanding certain things of you or wanting you to do different parts. So, thinking about that with investors, but also being able to be transparent with them from the beginning about how you're going to operate your business and what's important to you, I think is a really, really helpful. With co-founders, this is really interesting. I think like couples therapists work really well for co-founders. You are in a very close relationship with somebody, and you should take time out of your week every week to think about the patterns you're developing with that person and the behaviors, how you handle conflicts, and where you kind of come together. My husband is building a startup and I'm working with him on that. And we started this practice of every 6 weeks, we take a step back for planning, and we have this like list of questions we go through. What feels different now than 6 weeks ago? What did we learn? But also like what energized us, what got in the way, not just in the market or with our customers, but what got in the way of our own short-sightedness, what got in the way of our own emotions. And I think that asking those questions regularly with each other, maybe it's not a co-founder, maybe it's just your team in general, but like taking a step back every so often and making this a ritual that you do as part of your culture to actually check in of like, what's energizing you, what's getting in your way beyond just the regular blockers of like a sprint plan, but like what's really like emotionally what's getting in your way, I think creates some of that connection and that space to be vulnerable, where you actually deepen your relationship, and that just has so many benefits. There's this guy who writes about what is it? It's like vortex of positivity or something like that. But basically it's like when and it works both ways. There's like vortexes of negativity where you just like spiral, and when everyone is in a funk, everyone just starts to spiral. But when you break that and you have like a vulnerable connected conversation, you start to spiral upwards, and that kind of ripples throughout your entire organization. And so I think as an entrepreneur, as a founder, as a leader, it's important to help model those in relationships with other people, and having those really connected conversations that just like helps everyone shine a little brighter.
I love that. I love that. And I felt like you all said very different things, but what I really loved was I felt like there was a through line of, if the question is, how do I navigate relationships with external forces like co-founders, VC, what have you, it's I navigate myself. I don't navigate those relationships, I navigate myself. Which I think is a really important context, because I think we do spend a lot of time spinning on how we fix these external situations, but really we just have to find the right version of ourselves and the right tools within ourselves to get where we need to be, because we can't change other people. Love that. I'm gonna stay with you, Ryan. How do we cope with imposter syndrome?
Oh, I hate that word. Okay. I really like, if I could strike a phrase from our lexicon, it would be this phrase. Well, there's probably a lot more I would strike, but I really don't like this phrase for two reasons. So imposter syndrome, I think it does two things. One is it actually just masks what emotions are really going on. Like when you stay at this, like, I have imposter syndrome, you're not digging deep into what are you actually experiencing and feeling. For me, like I lived in that moment for a long time. I was like, I have imposter syndrome. I don't know what I'm doing. Like I'm out of my league. And what it came down to was like a lot of self-doubt, which developed from other previous patterns, and also a feeling like I didn't belong, right? So like I would walk into a boardroom, I would walk into an investor meeting, and it was like a lot of what seemed like wealthy people who like just I didn't fit with them. I didn't feel like I belonged with them, and I internalized that into self-doubt. And so that's the second part of what I don't like about that phrase, is it internalizes that self-doubt rather than reflecting on like the culture that you are surrounded with. And I think that like for a lot of folks who don't feel like they fit in, whether that's because of just their personality, their background, their race, their gender, it's a huge disservice just to say, oh, that's imposter syndrome, and not to name like there are cultural elements at play that feel exclusionary to a lot of entrepreneurs. And that is some work that we need to do as a society that just gets completely erased by imposter syndrome. And so I feel like the phrase imposter syndrome is like this petri dish in which like self-doubt and exclusionary culture just gets to like grow without any kind of like light shone through it, with transparency and conversation about those things. And so, you know, if you hear somebody say that, I would really encourage to like dig deeper, like what is actually going on for you or for this person when they say imposter syndrome, and can we name it with something else?
I love that. Anthony, do you have thoughts?
Oh, I have many thoughts. I agree with Ryan when it comes to, I think, I guess three things around this. So one, I think imposter syndrome has been put out there as a form of comparison, and you can't compare yourself to other people, like truly, because no one has ever lived your life. No one is living your life. No one will ever live your life. So in existence and for forever, no one will be you, and then no one will be you trying to start the business that you are. And just how to, like, I think stay grounded in that is that going back to like, what have you done? Like I used to throw discus. I'm a 5'7" at the time, 165-pound person throwing against like 6'4", 7-foot arm span, and tall and long is very advantageous. But I was throwing my way. And I think that is the same thing with being an entrepreneur. And I think the last piece around this is, one, just don't say imposter syndrome, and dig deeper. Use your words. And if you have trouble finding the words, there's a great cool tool called the Feeling Wheel, that was created by Dr. Gloria Wilcox. And I'll share a link after I finish talking, but it's the Feeling Wheel, and you can find your words there. And if there's a word not there that say like different culturally used, whatever, add your own words. And and it's all back to kind of this thing that we talk about, like, you have to understand you're human before you're an entrepreneur. And for imposter syndrome, just you're you. I mean, stop reading some of the market in the magazines and whatever. And if you see another article about imposter syndrome, don't read it. Do something else, dig deeper, that kind of thing. And that's not avoidance. That's just not like, the more imposter syndrome articles you read, the more you'll think about and believe in imposter syndrome. So you have to reprogram yourself through doing the deeper work.
Kasey, about your thoughts?
It's interesting. My experience is very different. And I totally respect where both of you are coming from on this. I think that the label with anything mental health related, I think, is always very dangerous. You talk to a lot of people that will be like, I'm anxious. And they're like, I have anxiety disorder. Like, that is who I am. Like, and it's not okay, let's dig deeper and let's understand where that's coming from and how we can work on healing that. It's like, I think the downside to a lot of the conversation around mental health over the last probably 5 years. And then when I say conversation, let's be real, I'm talking about like on TikTok. So not real conversation, but like the sort of popularity. Some of it is good, but the challenge, I think, is people start to identify with things. And so they don't go deeper, and they don't understand how they can understand this, process it, heal it, all the rest. And I think imposter syndrome is very similar there. No, and I also fully understand that I am very biased as a cis, straight, white, privileged lady. But for me, first learning about imposter syndrome made me be like, oh, me thinking that I am out of my depth or I don't belong in this is not me. It's a thing that lots of people feel, and it immediately made me feel so much better, like so much better. And one of my worries when we talk about kind of systemic oppression and exclusion and all the rest is, yes, we absolutely need to be doing the work to fix those problems, but we also have to recognize that that's going to be a long freaking road. And if we sit around waiting for that to get fixed, it's not going to be in time to change what we're going through right in this moment. And so there does have to be this realization that, like, yes, the systems that put me in this situation, I have nothing to do with, but I can't rely on those systems to solve it for me. I'm the only one who can do that. And over time, what I have learned about myself is that when I feel imposter syndrome, it is always when I am in the process of leveling up. It is when I am in the middle of something that is like, holy shit, I can't believe I'm going to do this. And it's crazy and it's amazing. And now I know when I feel it, it means I'm on the right track. I like view it as this like brilliant freaking sign that something amazing is about to happen. And it's funny, I really, really wish I could remember the book where I originally read this. I know I read it in some book a few years ago. I can't for the life of me figure out which one it is, but I read this story about Bruce Springsteen. And early in his career, he had horrible stage fright, and he would still get out, but he would like be vomiting backstage, and he was really, really grappling with it, really struggling with it. And I can't remember if someone helped him figure this out or how he figured this out, but all of a sudden he realized, like, okay, all the things that I'm feeling that tell me that I have stage fright, my heart starts to race. I start to sweat. My stomach starts to feel all jittery. I get goosebumps on my arms. Yeah, I could view that as fear, or maybe I could view it as, oh my God, I'm about to do something that really freaking matters to me. And he just like switched it to look at it as, oh my God, I'm about to do something freaking awesome, instead of, "Ugh, I'm scared shitless." And it like completely changed his ability to deal with it and to kind of work through it. And that's not going to work for everybody, but truly, like the moment I started to connect the dots of, for me, imposter syndrome was like, I am about to seriously level up in life or in business or whatever. I now, like, when I feel it, I get pumped, like I get excited, and I view it as just a sign that, like, yeah, I'm on the right track.
I love that. Okay, I'm going to share two things, and then we're going to go to like a feel-good question, and then we're going to take questions from our audience. So two things I want to share. There's a really interesting article in the New York Times that I read probably 2 or 3 months ago, and I will try to find it and share it. But it was about the origins of the term imposter syndrome, and it was coined by these two research psychologists, two white women, and they coined it to sort of contextualize what they were feeling, like a lot of what you're talking about, Kasey, right? Like we're feeling these things, but we know it's not real, but yet we feel it, and it's holding us back. And so they kind of researched it together and they came up with the term imposter syndrome. And they have now both debunked it, like they don't want the term to be used anymore. And that was because they were doing like, years later, they were in like this group of women and they were like all sharing their stories of imposter syndrome. And they get to this Black woman and they asked, like, tell us about your experience with imposter syndrome. And she's like, I don't have imposter syndrome. And they're like, you don't? And she's like, no, the world is actively working against me. I'm not confused about that fact. And they were like, oh yeah. And so I view imposter syndrome as like a bridge. It was like the bridge to acknowledging that there was not equity. And I do think we probably need to leave it behind now that we've acknowledged that there's not equity, and maybe we have some paths for figuring out how we get equity. And imposter syndrome is absolutely something that I've dealt with my entire life. In particularly recently, where I've spent a couple of years, getting people to post videos about their mental health, particularly in a business sense, online. And then suddenly people were like, hey, come talk to our team about mental health in the workforce. And I'm like, well, I'm not a mental health professional, so you shouldn't talk to me. And they're like, no, we want to talk to you. Come moderate our panel. Like, I'm not a mental health professional. Like, no, we want you to do it. And I realized that I can do it, right? Because I'm here representing people like us. And I'm not pretending I'm a mental health professional. I'm just a regular person with a lot of experience who has a particular passion about a topic. So I just think it's interesting. Imposter syndrome is, well, it doesn't exist. But it is something that we are also dealing with. Okay.
Yeah.
So how about we talk about how we take a break? Like, what are the things that we actually do? And I've heard some anecdotes from each of us about some of the things we use. So you can't just constantly be on guard dealing with your mental health. You do need to be able to tune out. You do need to be able to relax. So let's start with you, Anthony. Like, what are some of the things you do to cope? Some of the things you do to tune out?
Yeah. And I'll say I'll go through this. The reason why, is like I learned about burnout when I was 14, and I was about 13, 14, junior high. Came home one day and my dad's lady friend at the time was like there, and I was like, in my mind, I'm like, what are you doing there? She's like, well, she's like, your dad's in the hospital. And so I go, and looking back in the story, like he was working a full-time job and had a janitorial company he was running. And so he got to the point of burnout, of like stage 5 of the 5 stages of burnout, to the point of burnout where he was in the hospital for several days. And I only recently kind of realized that. And so now when I think about doing things to make a positive impact on my mental health, so my mental wealth deposits, I try to keep it varied. And I'll list them, and I'll list them because they're mine, but mine aren't necessarily yours. Just the caveat of this. So like some of the things I do are like the 5 things, like travel. When we couldn't travel during the pandemic, I got on webinars with that my friends were hosting for their business. Not necessarily get business advice, but just like, hey, I get to see my friends and support my friends. I got back into throwing discus. It's been 30 years. Yeah. 30 years since I competed in high school or taught in coach in college. Got back into cycling, picked up started doing digital photography, coloring books, Netflix, fun series, cartoons. I have plants. I don't have pets or kids. And so like I have plants but I specifically got plants that I can go like 2 weeks without watering because it'll be fine. Love that snake plant, man. Just easy. But I had to figure these things out. And remembering things that like filled me with joy, and the topic of joy is a whole nother thing, but like doing things that are fun to me. Like I go running and I run marathons, not for the competitive nature of it, but because when I run a marathon or I finish a marathon and go through the process of finishing a marathon, I get to see a city in a way that you never get to because all the roads are blocked off and then like cool people are cheering and stories and meetings. And so I just find those things, some of them cost something other than my time, and then some of them are just my time, but it's the stuff I do now. But 5 years from now, who knows what I may be doing? I may be a farmer or something, just like, but I still have your business. But I think to the point of all the stuff we've been talking about, I do these things, they fill me with joy, but they all also teach me the thing of starting as anew. So this sense of failure and stuff that we have in our business, like doing things for the first time again, you're going to be horrible at them. Like learning to draw. Yeah, it doesn't look good now, but down the road it may. But yeah, it's fun doing, and sometimes I do things with other people too, because loneliness is real. Community and social contact for the most of the population in the world is a part of our being human. So I make time for that stuff too.
I love that. How about you, Kasey?
I have, I think my perspective is very similar in that it's an always evolving thing. One of the things that has been super helpful for me, so my boyfriend, my partner is like, he's a little bit of a workaholic, but he is like the most present in the moment human I think I have ever met. And he really helped me learn how to, particularly, it's like every meal is not a transaction. It's an experience. Mm-hmm. And I think what has been very helpful for me is finding all of the ways to make something in the present moment feel like an experience, not an activity. Right. So for the longest time, like I do love, working out and going for long walks and all these other things. But for the longest time, I would always be like listening to a podcast or listening to a nonfiction audiobook at like 1.3 speed. And it's like, I'm knocking out two things at once. And now I will force myself to listen to nothing, or like classical music or something that I can't sing along to where I don't feel like I'm being freaking productive at the same time. It feels really strange and really awkward, but it's really good. And I do think it's like, it's about appreciating those little things. Anthony, I want to hear you, and I need to talk about your digital photography sort of journey, because that's I've done in kind of fits and starts, because it's one of those things where it's like you have to be slow, right? Like you have to pay attention to small things. I'm a terrible gardener, but my partner is like an absolutely incredible one. So I sit out there and provide moral support and chit chat with him while he's doing actual work. And like little things like that, and finding ways to sort of appreciate the small things, and like really like like actively pursuing not being active. That for me is it. And the more I've done this, the more I found opportunity to do like real travel or create these kinds of experiences. Also, I read an ungodly amount of books. And my rule is fiction, or excuse me, nonfiction during the day, only fiction at night. And that is also really helpful and really restorative for me. I want books that will make me sob like a weirdo on an airplane.
I love that. And I really love your point. I'm using my own words, but I love your point. I discovered being non-productive in the past year and how important and healthy it is. And like my girlfriend made me take my first actual vacation last summer, and it was like 7 days. And I was like, I can't go on vacation for 7 days. And she's like, we're going.
So
Right.
also pro tip on this one. So we went to Greece in April, and it was our first like real vacation in a really long time. And I found a company called Kim, where you say where you want to go, you say how much you want to spend, you tell them like what kind of experience you want to have. And when we got there, they introduced us to Nikos, our like Greek trip organizer and travel planner. And I am not exaggerating. He planned literally every single thing. And I have not had a 10-day period, maybe in my entire life, definitely not my adult life, where I wasn't the planner. Like I haven't had a whole day, 10 days, and it was genuinely mind-blowing. I guarantee everyone on this call is like a really, really damn good planner. Find a way to take a trip that you don't plan anything.
Mm-hmm.
And it will be like it's actual relaxation.
Ryan, how about you?
Yeah, I was laughing, Kasey, as you were talking about being non-productive. I was being recruited by this founder to be a co-founder for this initiative, and I like flew down to the Bay. We met, and we're like going out for lunch, and he's like watching me tie my shoes to go out the door, and he's like, I don't buy any shoes with shoelaces because I don't want to waste any time tying shoes. And I was like, I don't know if this is gonna work because I am the opposite, and I'm like, where are we perpetuating hustle culture? Like, where is this coming from? Like, we create this narrative in our heads that we're emulating certain people, or that we just have to go, and that's going to be the key to success. So I work 4 days a week. I take Fridays off. And every 6 weeks, I work for 6 weeks, and then I take a week off to do planning. It's not exactly vacation, but it's like I have these big picture conversations because this allows me to be focused, right? And there's a ton of stuff that like gets added to my plate that is on my sprint boards that are like, I have emails waiting that like, I'm just not going to get to. And that's okay, because if I'm not getting to them, it actually is an indicator that that's not a priority, right? And so I think like the first thought about this is to be very clear about priorities and what's worth your time and how to say no to things, and to be okay with unfinished ideas or unfinished projects by knowing what is really a priority for you and what's going to move the needle for your company and for yourself. So having that time to actually step back every 6 weeks and focus again is really, really helpful for me, because that allows me to also then like take more breaks. I think, I don't know, I do struggle with this one. I'm lucky to have a husband who pulls me out of things from time to time. And it's like, no, we're closing the computer today. But I think that it's partly being focused, and it's partly trusting your team. It's really fascinating working in a decentralized company right now. And I toggle both. I have my very hierarchical centralized company where I'm the CEO. And then I'm also in this decentralized company where the team, you just trust others to really work versus like, having to manage them. And I think learning to give up a little bit of control and trusting a team and making sure that like you can pop out a little bit and decisions are going to still happen and things are still going to get done. It's a very interesting exercise in like comparing and contrasting the two. And it's teaching me a lot about being comfortable with other people having autonomy to do things that keep the ball moving forward. And that allows a little bit of emotional permission to go away for a minute, right? So it's both like, I think, creating habits of like, I'm not going to work on Friday, or I'm going to step back every 6 weeks, that allow for that practice to develop of stepping back, and then also trusting that others, and giving permission and autonomy to others, so that you don't feel like everything just crumbles if you're not there 24/7. And that's a really hard muscle to develop, but I think it's a really important one.
I love that. That's amazing. All right. Now we're going to take some questions. Kara, I know you had a question that you wanted to post to the group, and then we'll see if we have some time for a few more from our attendees today.
Well, my question has evolved, but it still like comes from the same place. First off, thank you all. Everything you're saying, I'm like, yes, we need to talk about this all the time. I think what I'm the most interested in is how, because this is what I struggle with, how to navigate the boundary ignorers, infringers, and encroachers. And I can give some examples, but I think I'll say, like, for me, I spent a lot of time since 2020 going through this therapy journey and understanding why I act the way that I do, which, you know, sounds very similar to a lot of the behaviors everyone else has. And now, like, the world has sort of come back. Like, it was easy to have boundaries when no one invited you to anything and you didn't have to leave your house. And now it's like, hey, my whole life has changed, and there are stepkids, and I need to be home at 5 o'clock for dinner, and I'm not available for happy hour anymore. And people that have not, you know, historically had those boundaries with me have really struggled. And so, like, I'm curious, like, how you navigate that. So I even had someone the other day, I was like, look, unless it's a revenue generating call for my organization, I'm not booking out coffees right now until August or September, because that's all the time I have. And the response was, well, wow, don't you think you're important? And I'm like, well, yeah, my time kind of is. So, right, I see all of your faces. So how, and then I have all the guilt because I'm not responding, like, blah, all the stuff. But like, all those people exist. So like, what are your kind of tips and tricks to like push through all that?
Okay. The thing that immediately, I'm glad you gave that example. The thing that immediately comes up for me about that is that clearly is someone who is completely unable to set their own boundaries. And what I've learned, and this is something I'm dealing with in my day job right now, is people love me or they straight up despise me, and there is no in between. And what I have learned is that, like, most people, like, most people like me, and I'm sounding really, anyway, most people like me, but there's occasionally, there's occasionally people that really don't. And what I have learned over time is that it tends to be people that are deeply, deeply insecure, not terribly authentic, or really struggle to be authentic. And there is something about, even when I don't think I was all that confident or all that authentic, I really came across like I was. And so people who really struggle to be bold, to be themselves, all the rest, I make them very angry. And they will be cruel and they will attack. And it's a thing I'm dealing with right now. So I'm like right in the middle of it. So what I have learned is empathy to that person, that they are so incapable of setting their own boundaries and supporting themselves in their life, that they have to be brimming with resentment at your ability to do it for yourself. And like, when I have the empathy, it's much easier for me to let go of the guilt. Mm-hmm. And it's much easier for me to continue to show up in those interactions with my like higher vibration, the confidence that I am a good, kind, like, loving human. and their inability to see that it has nothing to do with me and it is all on them. And so like my biggest recommendation in those situations is repeat it again. And depending upon the moment and what you need for yourself, vacillate between feeling empathy for them and being like, oh, feeling a little bit petty and superior that not your fucking problem. Ooh, didn't do it then. Sorry, guys.
You almost made it the whole way.
I almost made it. Not your problem that person can't do it for themselves, and your ability to do it for yourself makes them really, really freaking angry.
Love it.
I love it too. And I'm gonna my husband's gonna laugh when he hears this because it's a lesson I'm learning and he's helping me learn, but like, it is okay to disappoint people.
Yeah.
Like, it is absolutely okay. And I think part of it comes with some self-compassion to say like, can't please everybody. And these are what I need to do. Because, and I feel it, like I have somebody right now who's like, really wants to make something happen and it's not the biggest priority for me, and it's like they're emailing me once, twice a day, they have my phone number, and I made it very clear like I will get to it, but it's not going to be this week. And it's like, and I feel bad, like I ended my week last week and I felt unsettled and I was like, I didn't get back to this person and I really want to get, I owe them that. And it's like, my husband's like, you don't actually owe them something, and it is okay that they feel disappointed. And I think that that's like, being comfortable disappointing people is like a hard lesson to learn. We are often taught to be people pleasers. We often feel a lot of our self-worth comes in external validation in that moment. And I'm still learning it, but I think like coming back and just remembering like, oh, it's okay to disappoint people. And that person, if they really want to talk to me, can book coffee in August.
Yeah.
Yeah. The only thing I add is that, I mean, and Kasey and Ryan kind of alluded to this, if you listen to the thread is center on yourself. So like the last thing you said was like, and I feel guilty about this, like flip the explanation, flip the story and go, let me work on myself on feeling guilty about this, because this is always going to happen. No matter what boundary you set, somebody's going to do something to push against it or have their own issues around it, or just be petty. But focus on yourself and the stuff you want to get through. And I think somebody put it in the comments, and if you don't have an autoresponder, pop one in. It also acts as my assistant, my marketing agent. Like I put the stuff that I'm working on, how to book me. And Reggie alluded to it earlier. Like one of the things I have in there is like, if you need to call me, you already have my number. Like, and I know everyone's situation is different, but like you already have my number, I already have yours. So we can already communicate that way. Otherwise, you're just another person emailing me. And if you're focused on money, like I'm like, cool, I'll call you in October, or I'll schedule with you in October. If somebody can't understand the fact that you're trying to get money and revenue for your business to succeed in a down economy, like they're not even they don't even make the list of priorities for me. So.
Andres, you raised your hand with a question. You want to come off mute and share?
Yeah, briefly. I know it's about to finish and everything, but there is something I really want to get their input on. But before that, I just want to share that I really feel really identified with many of the things that were shared, and the way, people was willing to be incredibly honest and truthful and sometimes emotional and even vulnerable. Just I believe it makes everyone connect with their stories, when there's perspectives, and I do resonate a lot. I've been in the US living here for a very short amount of time. It's been like a week or so. I'm being here by myself, far away from my family and from my wife and baby to be, and everything is tough, and life here is people here work really hard. And the culture is really strong, and here is just kind of like adapting to the whole thing. It's really interesting, but at the same time challenging and demanding, because the balance and finding the harmony it's like a secret sauce. It's different for everyone. I do resonate with the plants. I bought one plant to make me company And I have also my books and, you know, things that bring me joy. You know, I even bought this candle because the person who sell it had a very lovely story, and she was so passionate about making candles. And it was like, yeah, it looks like a pineal gland too. You just like, you know, it's like, wow. So, you know, I might not have a lot of things, but I think I have things that bring me joy because my family cannot be here with me. But yeah, my question is, I thinking in a systems level, in a kind of like society, or kind of like you know, the unconscious, collective unconscious, who might be able to transform these kind of conversations into normal again, into, you know, into this is, we are humans and we are vulnerable and we break our heart sometimes and we are angry sometimes and we are happy many times, and, you know, we are just humans. How might I be able to go back to that, to be more humans in a more collective kind of way? But what do you think? I know there is no one, you know, only one answer, but
It's interesting. That's such a beautiful question, and much love to you for like doing what you're doing and the journey that you just explained. I think there is no going back to what things used to be because now the world is different. However, there is the kind of how we kick this off, kind of the modeling that really live your life and connect it with other people in the way that you like, how you vibe with that, how you talked about being the vulnerability and all this. Obviously not everybody deserves your vulnerability. I think Brene Brown talks about that. But it is truly like everything you do in your business, people are watching. Somebody is always watching. You don't know who, you don't know where they're from. There's people going to be watching this video and watch you ask that question and talk about your story. That could be from Peoria, Illinois, or from, you know, Bogota, Colombia, you know, like watching this, you never know. So it's, I think it's just living the best version of your life that you can in the moment, and then connecting with other people doing the same along the way. And to your point, we make mistakes and whatever, but like the only way to like change what's happening is to create a new way of doing things and to amplify that. Because right now a lot of negativity and all these things are being amplified. That's how they survive. I mean, there's a lot of light shining on them. So keep doing what you're doing, and that's how I think one of the ways to move forward.
Love it.
Yeah,
Anybody? Go ahead.
I think like creating space on an individual to individual level, it's not the systemic change, but that is where cultural change really happens. There are things outside of our control. Like, yes, if we had, you know, a marketing budget where we could take message out, there's organizations that do that, right? But I think as we as individuals, making space and time for those conversations, and maybe that's like if you're building a company, maybe that's, you know, 1 out of every 4 meetings is actually kind of emotionally led, or you know, maybe you kick off meetings with some vulnerability and some conversation around emotions, and then get to something else. And you know, I'm like in this decentralized organization of therapists, we have strong value of anti-racism. And very early on was like, well, how do we actually live that without just like performing it and saying it? Like, what does that look like? And what the therapists and we all came up with is like, that looks like individual level conversations. And so for us, that means like every meeting starts with a conversation about like, how does the topic at hand intersect with issues around racism and oppression? And likewise, you know, 1 out of every 4 meetings is actually a training and just a space for us to connect around issues of race and identity. And so it is actually investing the time to have these conversations with other people and building that in those conversations into the culture that you're creating, and seeing that as part of the work. And it's like, you know, I think it's so easy to say like the work is just this tiny little sliver that brings in the revenue, but this is the work of building a team and building a company, and to commit to having those conversations.
Kasey, you
Yeah.
say anything quickly? Go ahead.
You know, I honestly, I think Ryan and Anthony have really kind of covered it. I think that this is the great challenge right now, is that we see all of this I don't know, kind of toxicity and hatred on like a systemic level, and we want to somehow turn that tide. And it's really hard to recognize and to accept the fact that we can't, and we've got to focus on small steps and our own little sphere of influence and doing what we can. But I also think conversations like the one we're having today is also really helpful, right? So finding communities that are also doing this work of trying to be just a little bit more human in the world, I think is very, very helpful.
Repetition, repetition, repetition. We are out of time today. I'm going to go ahead and announce that we will be back to unpack and reframe imposter syndrome. That's right, Riley. You heard it here for the first time. I want to thank all of our panelists here today. This was the joy of my day, and I hope this was useful and helpful for everyone who attended. Thank you so much for being here.
Yeah, thank you, everybody.
Been wonderful.
Thank you
Appreciate all
so
of you.
very much. I'm going to
Thanks,
rope you back
everyone.
in. Thank you, Reggie, for setting that up for us. I greatly appreciate it.
And thank you, Riley, for being the driver behind this and knowing how important it
Yes.
is and bringing it to this community. This would not have happened without you.
Yes.
Yeah. All right. I'm going to shut you all down. Have a great Tuesday.
All right.
Thanks,
Bye, everybody.
Take care.